Swatch video. We will get to those momentarily. As you can see, we're here today to talk about the Lavender One from Lawless. This is their newest release, available on their website as well as Sephora. If you purchase it at Sephora, it is $35 Canadian or $27 US. It claims to be limited edition, so if this is something that catches your eye, I'm not entirely sure how long it'll be around for. This is a vegan product as well as being cruelty-free, and it says that it is an ultra-wearable, lavender-inspired, talc-free eyeshadow palette featuring 8 matte and shimmer shadows in neutral and lavender tones. So we're going to get into the swatches, and you're going to see with these swatches that the first go-round is a little bit anemic. I will go in and boost them up with a second go round, but on the first pass, they leave a little to be desired. I did not put any primer on my arm, so this is just dry skin and going in with the finger as you see. So for my personal preferences, I prefer there to be a bit more pigmentation. However, as you'll see when we go through the second round of swatches, they do build up. So it comes down to personal preference. There are pros and cons to having somewhat lightly pigmented shadows. If they can build up, it's really not that big of a deal. If they don't, well, if you really like a light wash of color, that might work for you. For me, not so much. There are some issues with the matte shadows, but I'm going to wait until we get into the eyeshadow portion, the eye swatch portion of this video, because it's going to become a lot more apparent. And this is why I think having a mix of finger swatches and eyeshadow, like I keep calling it eyeshadow swatches, eye swatches, is very helpful because the way they swatch on my arm is different to how they apply on my eyes. And we will see that momentarily. Palette. So you'll see there are 2 matte shades on this row and then 2 metallics. The metallic shades on this bottom row, I think, perform much better than the one on the top. And that's going to become a bit more apparent again when we get into the eye swatches. The shadows themselves, the matte shades, they are very soft to the touch. And I don't mean that in the sense that they're super crumbly. I just mean like texture-wise, they're rather smooth. They don't feel dry at all. There is some fallout with them, nothing to write home about. Just make sure you tap off the excess and you're good to go. Doing the finger swatches, there was just a little bit of flaking of those matte shadows in the pan. Again, it's really neither here nor there. When I use my brush, it kicks up a bit in the pan, but it's not a big issue. Even with that deepest shade, I didn't find that I had specks of shadow falling down onto my cheeks or anything that would annoy me in that way. The metallics themselves, those 2 on the bottom in particular, are again also very smooth. They pick up very easily on the brush and deposit onto the eyes nice. Although all of the shimmer shadows in this palette do stand to be hit with a little bit of setting spray. They just perform much better if you use that. The shimmer shadow on the top left is just, well, you'll see it when we get into the eye swatches. It's just not great. It doesn't really pick up with the brush all that easily, and there's a lot of just spottiness with it. I also picked up the Forget the Filler lip gloss. This one's in the shade Violet Bloom. This retails for $34 Canadian or $26 American, and this shade in particular is said to be limited edition, although they do have a lineup with quite a few other color options as well. Free, and the highlighted ingredients are hyaluronic acid and shea butter. And I did find it has a slight cooling sensation, but nothing terrible. It's not to the extent of the Buxom lip glosses, which I cannot stand. So now we are going to get into the eye swatches, obviously. I did show the Lorac primer. That is what I have used between each of these swatches. And then I did set it down with just a very slight amount of loose setting powder, just so that I didn't have any stickiness on my lid. Now you will see, even though I've used that primer, it doesn't hide the discoloration that I have on my lids. So what you see is what you get. And again, with these shadows, I've just used the same brush for each one. This is the Worker brush from Sonia G. And I like it because it has a bit of a flatter shape as well as a thicker bristle density. I don't know how to describe it. So it kind of does all things equally well. So it can blend out edges and it can also lay down like shimmer shadows and pack shadows onto the lid. That's why I like it for these eye swatch videos. So I will read to you what the color descriptions are just for your own information. So we've already gone through one, obviously. And that first shade that I applied, which was one of the matte shades, is, I am trying desperately to find it in time. Here we have it. That was the shade Rose Water, which is a matte, soft, neutral pink. And I am currently going in with the shade Lavender, which is described as a matte lavender. They really didn't get too creative with the naming of these shadows. So the issue that I have with some of these mattes, with most of these mattes, should become pretty evident just watching this particular swatch. I did go in and build it back up, but even at that, at some point it sort of hits max density, and then the pigment I find is just sort of moving across my lid and isn't really building up anymore. And that's why I think having the eye swatches is helpful to see, because again, the arm swatches, you didn't see any of that patchiness, but when you actually use a brush and try to blend these out, I did find personally that it was a bit frustrating. At the end of this video, you will see a look that I did put together using this palette. So it is workable. I don't want to make it sound like it's the worst thing I've ever used, but it certainly is not without its frustrations. The shade that I'm applying here is called Orchid, described appropriately enough as a matte orchid. You're going to have to forgive me. For some reason, I'm using a new editing software because my other one has crapped the bed and will not work anymore. And this one is also not without its frustrations. So when I'm watching the playback doing this video right now, it is not completely synced. So I'm doing the best I can, but if I forget to mention a specific shade as I'm doing this, it's because I'm not seeing it in the playback. I'm kind of going at this a little bit blind, and it's really frustrating. I'll continue to work with this program and see if I can figure that out, but I just wanted to flag that for you, that my issues with technology are still happening. Anyways, this shade performs much better than the lavender shade, but pretty much anything performs better than the lavender shade, if I'm being perfectly honest. Here, which is called Blackberry. I was really impressed with it when I first swatched it on my arm, and I thought that it was really interesting and a really unique shade. It's a really nice mix of purple and gray, and off the top of my head, I can't think of any other shades that I have in my collection that look exactly like it. The problem that I find with it, at least with my skin tone, is that it looks very much like a bruise. It just does not translate well with the yellow that I have in my skin, and it just looks like I've sustained some sort of horrific injury. When I did the eye look that you'll see at the end of the video, I did bring this shade underneath my lower lash line and instantly regretted it because bruise. It just does not look nice at all, at least on my skin tone, in my opinion. The upside, it does build up nicely and it doesn't suffer nearly as much in the way of patchiness as some of the lighter shades do. Although that's not to say that it's, perfectly pigmented, but it's better than the lavender shade. You would think with a palette called the Lavender One that the Lavender One in that palette would be the standout, but unfortunately that's just not the situation here. All right, and then we're going to go back in with the last matte shade before we move on to the shimmers. This one is the shade Praline, described as a matte taupe brown. And this one, I didn't find that I had nearly as much difficulty in terms of the evenness of the application over my lid. The problem I had with this one, for some reason, was just under the arch of my brow, it would not blend out, no matter what I tried. And again, like I said, I did set my eyeshadow primer, so it's not like it was a tacky spot that was like adhering to the shadow. It just wouldn't blend. And I have absolutely no explanation for that, but you can see it in the swatch here. So I just wanted to mention that again, there are some frustrations with this palette, and as pretty as the color story is, for me personally, and obviously that's the only opinion I can speak from is my own, I've used better. I'm just not a huge fan of this one. Again, if you like a lighter wash of color, I think you're going to love this. I think it's nice and light and airy in that sense. But if you're used to sort of the performance of indie shadows in particular, and if you like really pigmented mattes and really, impactful metallics, I would look elsewhere from this palette. Now going in with Pink Salt, which is an iridescent lavender. I'm just going to let the swatch kind of speak for itself, because all I can really do is just describe exactly what it is that you're looking at, and that is a rather disappointing metallic, in my opinion. There's just so much patchiness to it. You can see just on the edge of my nose there that there's already some flaking of those little micro glitter bits in there. I did go back in and hit it with some setting spray, trying to boost it up. That certainly helped. But this feels more like a topper, except that it does have a bit more substance to it than what a topper normally does, if that makes sense. I hope that it does. There is more base pigment, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than what traditional toppers would have. But even at that, it still just doesn't apply all that well. I think it would definitely look better as a topper, because seeing the amount of my skin that pokes through it, I would never just wear this on my lid on its own, just for my own personal preferences. As I said earlier, when we were doing the arm swatches, these next two metallics do perform much better. Again, I did go in and first apply them dry. I don't think I showed it for this one and the next one, but I did then go ahead and hit them with some setting spray as well. I just wanted you to be able to see what they look like straight out of the pan, and then boosted a bit with that. Also, forgive the state of my eyebrows, please. Why I didn't think to clean them up before using a million times magnification on my face is beyond me, but we're going to move past it. We're going to live. It's all good. I am not perfect. I have never claimed to be, never will claim to be. Anyways, that shade there was Rosé, a foiled mauve rose. And then we are going to move into the last shade in the pan, or in the palette, which is called Violette. And it is a foiled taupe plum, which I have to say, I do think is a very pretty color. It doesn't pull too hard taupe, doesn't pull too hard mauvey/purple. I think it's a really nicely balanced shade. I just think it's a little bit of a pain in the dick to work with, but it's doable. As you can see, that pink one does look so pretty once you use some setting spray with it. Now, I did wear this palette to the office, so I did get a full, I would say about 8 to 9 hours out of it. The foils did stand up and they did hold up throughout the day. The mattes, however, got a little muddy, so just wanted to make note of that. By the end of the day, it just very much looked like a bruise had happened. A rather sparkly bruise, but a bruise nonetheless. And then we are going to get into the application of the lip gloss, and it's all right. I prefer my lip glosses not to have any sensation to them, so the fact that it does have a little bit of a cooling, just I don't really like, but it certainly didn't tingle, it didn't hurt, it wasn't super distracting. Like I said earlier, it's not like the buxom glosses, so it is certainly doable, just not my personal favorite. But there you can see the eye look that I did pull out of this palette. This is obviously the beginning of the day, but by the end of the day, everything had sort of morphed together. Regardless, there you have it. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I will see you in my next one. Be a decent human being. Bye for now.